All right, looks like we are live. Welcome to Standing for Truth. I am your host, Donnie. Thank you all for being here for tonight's very important debate. I have Dr. Kent Hovind and Jackson Rowe here with me to debate the topic of transitional fossils. Do transitional fossils exist? And do they provide evidence for evolution? These questions and more will be discussed tonight. Now, if you are not yet subscribed and you love debates, interviews, discussions, and more, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and make sure to share around this content, as the truth is important. Now, tonight it will be another formal debate, as we do here on Standing for Truth. We strive to keep our debates professional, and we will be having up to 12-minute opening statements, 8-minute rebuttals, and a cordial back and forth discussion. After the discussion, we will have short 5-minute closing statements, and then this is where we get you guys in the audience involved. We're going to have an audience Q&A, so make sure you are tagging me with your questions at Standing for Truth. That way I won't miss them. So anyways, enough for me. Let's get right into the show. Let's get a brief introduction before Jackson Rowe would do his opening statement, though. Kind of break the ice here a little bit. Gentlemen, for giving us your time for tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Why don't we, Jackson, why don't we start with you? How you been and what's going on over at your channel?
Been doing good. Just been uploading some videos here and there. There've been some funny Kent parodies I've done. I sent Kent one of them. I think he thought it was funny. I didn't mean any offense by it. They were in good fun. But I've been uploading just some random stuff about science and recently about animal rights a little bit, not much, but kind of. So that's all really for me. I've also got a Transitional Fossil Facebook page I started like a month or two ago.
Well, I appreciate that introduction. Jackson, thank you for being here. Dr. Hovind, thank you as well for giving us your time for tonight. How you been and what's going on over at Dow?
Well, God is good. Some of God's kids drive me crazy, but God is good. Things going well. People coming here from visiting from all over the place at Dinosaur Adventureland in Lenox, Alabama. We're straight north of Pensacola, 70 miles. We have our 12,000 square feet of science center activities for people of all ages to do and learn about God's amazing creation. We believe the Bible is true. Evolution is not only stupid, it's dangerous. Dumb idea to believe you came from a rock. So that's what we do around here. We teach that God made the world in 6 days, and we're having a blast. We're in a new church building here, Genesis Baptist Church. Come on down, visit Dinosaur Adventureland. Everything's free. Come on, go fishing. Got 16 lakes to go fishing in if you want. Come on down.
Awesome. Sounds like a lot of fun. I appreciate that introduction. Dr. Dino, Kent, you're going to be a busy man. We've got a ton of debates for you over the next few months. You're going to be back here next week debating Matthew Steele on a similar topic. Is there reasonable evidence for evolution? Jackson, you'll be here next week, I believe it is as well, debating Raw Matt on did man live to 900? So that should be a lot of fun. So why don't we get right into the show? Jackson, we're going to hand it over to you. You have up to 12 minutes. As we always do, Jackson, if you don't use all of your time, we'll just throw it into the audience Q&A. So whenever you're ready, Jackson, I'll hand it over to you and you're good to go.
All right, let me share my screen here. You seeing it?
Yes.
All right.
Oh, yeah. There it is.
Yep. All right, so I don't have a script for this. I'm just kind of doing it ad hoc, so bear with me. This is the Devonian period, this section of slides. This is Goganasis, it's called. It was a Devonian lobe-finned fish. It had infolded enamel teeth like later tetrapods. It had a very tetrapod-like skull and spiracles here in the back for breathing, very large ones, like later tetrapods. Here's a artist depiction of it. Some of the lesser-known ones. There are a bunch of those. Here's fossil hunting on Ellesmere Island, Canada, North Canada. You're probably wondering why they went here. It's because this is Middle Devonian strata, and they predicted to find something like this. And lo and behold, they did. It's Tiktaalik, probably the most famous fossil on this list that I have. I'm sure everyone's heard of this one. Has a mobile neck, arms with all the corresponding bones in it, a flattened head, spiracles for breathing air, but still a fish. This is Elpistostege, also found in Canada. It's basically Tiktaalik 2.0. It has, unlike Tiktaalik, had the beginning of digits in its fin, shown by CT scans. This is a fossil of Acanthostega, another, believe it or not, fish, but very tetrapod-like. It had 8 digits, had no attachment to the vertebral column of the hip. It had a fish-like skull. It had internal gills and tail fin rays. But so this is basically a Darwin fish, as some other people have pointed out. This is Ichthyostega. This is an outline of what was found. They didn't find the front hand. They found the back foot. And like Acanthostega, it has multiple fingers and a kind of transitional structure. I'll show that more in a minute. This is, believe it or not, still a fish. This is Tiktaalik's arm with the corresponding bones that we have. This is Elpistostege's fin. You can see the beginning of digits in the fin. This is Acanthostega on the left and Ichthyostega on the right. You can see it's got 3 of the digits are actually kind of forming into a primitive sort of thumb. Here's a picture of the actual fossil. And I've heard creationists say a lot that sharks have always been sharks. Well, that's not really true. They started out as these, acanthodians. There are about 130 species of these. And yeah, they look very shark-like, but they weren't quite sharks. And here's an artist's depiction of some of the different types. They're from the Silurian period. Then we have some feathered theropods right here. Donnie, you've seen these in the debate with Guzman, I think. This is Siricornis, 165 million years old. Kai Hong, 161 million years old. Eosinopteryx, 160 million years old. Aurornis, 160. And my favorite, Anchihornis, 160. I have one of them behind me on a poster, a different fossil. They actually know the color of this feathered dinosaur from its fossilized melanosomes. It was a black and white theropod. Now let's look at some whales. Most of these, well, some of these you've probably heard of. This is Indohyus, one of the most primitive of the lineup. They have a They have dense bones, an adaptation for living semi-aquatic lifestyle, and an inner ear structure much like cetaceans. Even more like cetaceans is Pachycetus. The skull, inner ear structure, and teeth structure are basically identical to later protocetids and even basilosaurid whales. This is Ambulocetus, another well-known one. Cuchicitus, probably can't see that too well, had a very elongated skull. And isotope analysis on the teeth proved that it was actually able to drink seawater at this point. This is Myocetus, a relatively recent discovery, known from 2 specimens, one of which was pregnant, had a fetus in it. And from that, they can tell it was still giving birth on land. But its skull is basically identical to a Basilosaurus, which even creationists accept that Basilosaurus is a whale. Here's Paragocetus, discovered in Peru. What's interesting about this one is its caudal vertebrae were actually compressed in such a way that proved it had a kind of a beaver-like tail, sort of a proto-fluke. This is Georgiacetus, actually discovered in Georgia, the state, not the country. And its skull, as you can see, is basically identical to Basilosaurus here. It even has serrations on the teeth, unlike earlier legged whales. So basically identical skull. So if this is a whale, but that's not a whale, that doesn't make much sense. Here's the ear structure of Pachycetus compared to a modern whale. It's a very unique structure, not found in any other animal. So that's good evidence these are related. Here's the ankle joint of 2 primitive walking whales and a pronghorn. They actually evolved from artiodactyls, primitive artiodactyls. And these are the hind legs of Basilosaurus, which even creationists said was a whale, except this one had external hind limbs, had 3 toes on each one, some fusion going on, and some vestigial nature going on here. Definitely couldn't walk on land. They got up to 60 feet long. Now, turtle evolution. This is Odontochelys of the Triassic. This basically has half a shell. It has a plastron, but no carapace. It's intermediate between earlier Papachelys here and later Proganochelys. Here's a better diagram of them. Now going back in time a little bit, I didn't put these in order. This is Bicellum brazeri, the first multicellular organism found in the Precambrian, about 1 billion years old. It has 2 types of differentiated cells, as the name suggests, bicellum. This is a Hycuictis, a primitive chordate of the Cambrian period. It had no jaw and few fins, and just a primitive body structure overall. Then in the Silurian period, you have maxillate placoderms. There are a few species of these known. They're the first fish to have a maxilla, a premaxilla, and a dentary bone. So the first fish with a modern jaw. Then one of the smoothest gradients, the mammal line. You have pelycosaur synapsids at the bottom of the Paleozoic, going up to therapsids in the late Paleozoic, the Permian. Then you have cynodonts in the Triassic. You have mammaliaforms in the Jurassic, and they get a little bit more complex. And here's the modern day. This is Dimetrodon, a synapsid pelycosaur, the mammal-like skull. This is a gorgonopsid therapsid. It was still a reptile, but it had a very mammal-like layout. It was probably warm-blooded at that. Here's its skull. It had heterodont teeth. This is a cynodont, an even more mammal-like reptile of the Triassic. And then we get mammaliaforms in the Jurassic, primitive mammals. Here's some miscellaneous things I've cobbled together. This is the earliest known spider of the Devonian period, Atercopus. It had a segmented body, unlike modern spiders, and a whip-like tail, kind of like a whip scorpion. This is Tridobatrachus, an early frog. Had far more vertebrae than modern frog, a primitive kind of tail. And evidently it was not able to jump like modern frogs. Can't really see this very well, but this is Pasosiren. It had Sirenian ribs, skull, and teeth, but was also a quadruped. It lived about 50 million years ago in the Eocene. So that one's kind of hard to explain. Here's a short-necked giraffe, Chancytherium. And I'll skip these for now. We'll come back to that. Here's a recently discovered legged whale, Pheomacetus. They can tell it was related to the other ones by the skull structure. And they didn't find legs on it, but they did find vertebrae, and the neural spine suggests it had muscles that could carry its weight on land, so it did have legs. Then an interesting evolutionary prediction was this, Tetrapteryx in the early 1900s. Looking at Archaeopteryx, someone thought maybe this should exist, a four-winged dinosaur, so to speak. And lo and behold, in the 1990s, I think, they discovered Anchiornis. Exactly what that picture is, a four-winged primitive dinosaur predating Archaeopteryx by 10 million years. This is a Microraptor, another one with the four-wing layout. And most people are aware of Lucy, but few people are aware of Littlefoot, the most complete Australopithecine skeleton ever found. It's an Australopithecus prometheus. Everything from the neck down says it was a biped. Its spine, its ribs, its pelvis, its femur, its knees, its ankle joint, they all say it walked upright. And talking more about Lucy, there are other specimens of Lucy species, Afarensis. This is a large male, the big man fossil, it's called, about 5 feet tall. You can see a knee and a pelvis, the most important part of this fossil find. This is a juvenile Afarensis. These are two Australopithecus sediba. You can tell from their hips and body structure that they walked upright as well. This is Africanus, another upright walker. And Kent says dogs only produce dogs a lot, which is true. But going back far enough, you get this, Hesperocyon. It was near the caniform, feliform split a couple tens of million years ago. I forget when. But it looks almost like a civet or a cat, but it's technically still kind of a canine. So I would think it's not in the same kind, but I don't know.
1 minute.
All right. Should be able to get through. Here are just more walking whale fossils. These are skulls. That's Andrewsiphius. I'll go through them quick. That's Remingtonocetus, Gaviocetus, Dalanistes, and Casaracetus. And more tetrapods from the Devonian period. This one predates Tiktaalik. It's called Parmastega. And this is Ventostega, which is kind of intermediate between Tiktaalik and Ichthyostega and Acanthostega, based on what they found. It's not a complete skeleton, but it's enough.
10 seconds.
All right, we're good. So yes, I think they're transitional fossils.
All right. Well, I appreciate that opening statement there, Jackson. Also to the audience, we've got a great audience with a ton of questions flying in. So we're definitely going to have a solid audience Q&A. Dr. Dino, we're going to hand it over to you, brother. Whenever you're ready. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Jackson, for coming back to try this again. I take the position there is no such thing as an index fossil. There's no such thing as a geologic column. You kept referring to that over and over about the Devonian period, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk about that in a minute. But here we have in the Earth Science textbook back on my shelf, scientists use index fossils to determine the age of rocks. So if you find a rock layer and you say, how old is it? They'll say, what kind of fossils did you find in it? And they use the index fossils to determine the rock layer age. This is in all the textbook, index fossils, index fossils. So if
Oh, I'm going to... Jackson, is that just on my end, or did he freeze?
No, it's frozen for me too.
Okay. Let me see here. So if he's frozen, I'm going to obviously stop his timer and see if he makes his way back in. Dr. Hovind, I'm not sure if you can hear us or not. Okay. I see it in the chat. Thank you, guys. Yeah, frozen. So I got the timer pause as well. we'll see what's going on. And
usually have some technical difficulties in these debates.
Thought that might have been my internet connection for a second. So we'll wait for him to join. Maybe he probably just had a minor issue there. So
yeah.
As I'm looking through the chat, guys, thank you so much for the super chats and super stickers. Tons of great support, tons of great questions flying in. I've got a new studio, new background going on today. My buddy Nick helped me out, so I want to give him a shout out. He did a fantastic job. I'm pumped for this. Guys, we are good to go and ready for an epic year of debates, interviews, discussions, and there's Dr. Dino. Good to have you back, Kent.
Thank you. Good to be here. Our computer's crashed. According to evolution, it should have got better automatically, but it didn't work for us around here because we don't believe in it.
You're on index fossils if you
Could we just start over so you have a good edit point for your video there?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Just start off right at the 12-minute mark.
Okay. I take the position there's no such thing as an index fossil. There's no such thing as a geologic column. All the layers of the earth are the same age. How can they not be? We'll talk about that in a minute. This textbook says scientists use index fossils to determine the age of rock layers. They will tell you how old the layer of rock is by what type of fossil they find in it, and the textbooks are full of this kind of misinformation. They say, oh, you found this kind of clam or this kind of brachiopod. It's a Mesozoic or Jurassic or Triassic or Permian, and Jackson referred to those many times, based on the geologic column. So the layers of Earth are dated by the fossils they contain, which is ridiculous. If you take a jar of water and mud and shake it, it'll separate into sand and then silt and clay, and it'll happen in your hand while you watch it. The layers are all the same age in the jar. How can the top layer of our so-called geologic column be younger? They've got these dates on these things, 300 million years ago and 500 million years ago. It's all baloney. How could the top layer be younger? Did the material come from outer space? All the layers are the same age. I don't know why people aren't calling this to everybody's attention. Like, if you shuffle a deck of cards, is the top card younger? The geologic column, does it exist? No, not anywhere. Now, it's a fact the Earth has many layers of sedimentary rock. That's a fact. I've been to all 50 states and quite a few foreign countries and studied earth science and taught it for 15 years. Love it. We got layers of rock right here in our gravel pit in Lenox, Alabama. There are 7 layers of gravel they were digging for out of our gravel pit that go all the way to North Carolina. There's no question there are layers to the Earth. But the evolutionist says the layers form slowly over millions of years. Where is it coming from? What do you mean? Stop and think. Creationist says these layers are all from the flood in the days of Noah. One flood would shake things up and sort things out into layers quickly. Evolutionists are always trying to erase that line between the interpretation and the fact. It's a fact there are layers. It is not a fact they are different ages. There is no geologic column. But that's the Bible for the evolutionist. It can only be found one place in the world, and that is in the textbooks. If the geologic column existed in one place, it'd be 100 miles thick. So it's a lie number 7 on my video series that you can get for $50 on drdino.com. Creation Seminar Series, part number 4, lies in the textbooks. It does not exist. This textbook admitted it. If there were a column of sediments, unfortunately, no such column exists. It's all imagination, SpongeBob style. And then we talk about the fossil record. Wait. There's a lot of fossils in the ground. I mean, like bazillions of them, but it's not a record. None of them have a date stamped on them. None of them talk. You are putting your interpretation on them when you find a fossil. Really, all you know is it died. You couldn't prove it's transitional to anything. You couldn't prove it at any kids. To keep talking about this fossil record, there's no such thing as a fossil record. The Bible says God created the creatures and the whales to bring forth after their kind. That's all that's ever happened. That's all we observe today. This is why Jackson and other evolutionists or atheists have to go to bones they found in the dirt. Wait a minute. Why don't the animals today make something other than their kind? Horses have baby horses. Cows have cows. Dogs have dogs. There are no exceptions. Every farmer on the planet will tell you that in the history of mankind. So they have to appeal to fossils and go back long ago and far away. He mentioned about going back millions. You can't go back millions of years. When you dig a hole in the ground and look at Grand Canyon, they say you go to the bottom of Grand Canyon, so you're going back millions of years. No, you're not. You're going down to the bottom of a hole. It's the same time. When I was down at the bottom of Grand Canyon, I looked at my watch at the top. We helicopter rode down there. It was the same day when I got down to the bottom. Whoa, we didn't go back millions of years. Stayed the same day. Geologic column does not exist. They keep talking about index fossils. That's a lie. There's no such thing as an index fossil. Counting all the large and small, like the diatoms, there are probably trillions of fossils on Earth, indicating rapid burial. How many animals died today around the world? Bunch. How many are going to fossilize? Probably none. Fossils are not hard to find. We have thousands of them here in our museum. There's no question there's a lot of fossils, and they find them in huge layers, fossil beds. Here's a fish swallowing another fish. Wow, must have got buried quickly. Here's another one. I think Noah's flood would have done that. A whole school of fish fossilized. Well, if the tide's going up and down during Noah's flood uninterrupted, it would become harmonic, and you get a 200-foot tidal change every 6 hours, 12 and a half minutes. And the water coming up has to be coming from somewhere. That bump is rising. The water's being dragged in from the side at the same speed the Earth is turning. Here at my latitude, Lenox, Alabama, we're 31 degrees above the equator, turning 886 miles an hour right now toward the east. Well, if the water's coming in at 886, it's going to bring a layer of mud in 50 feet thick in 10 seconds and bury animals and turn them to fossils. Why don't we find fossils forming today? Fossils are common. Clam beds, gigantic, 10-foot thick, millions of petrified clams in the closed position. Got a couple of them right here. We got a whole bunch in our museum. Petrified clams in the closed position. This indicates rapid burial because clams die when they open. So finding fossils is not hard, but there are no index fossils. All the layers are the same age. When you find a fossil in the dirt, all you really know is it died. You could not prove it had any offspring. In a court of law, Jackson, all your fossils you just mentioned would be thrown out with one simple statement. Your Honor, he could not prove those bones he showed had any children. You're right, throw it out. Secondly, you couldn't prove they had offspring that were different. No animal today can do that. Why do you think a bone you found in the dirt can do something no animal today can do? Produce offspring other than its kind. All you guys do is draw lines on paper, and you connect all kinds of things and say, see, here's our tree of life. The humans have a common ancestor with an octopus, and it was an amoeba. This is simply lying to the children, drawing lines on paper. Transitional fossils, the topic of the debate tonight. A fossil that exhibits characteristics of both ancestral and derived form. Now, wait a minute. So this is a fossil that's halfway between what it started off as and what it is today. That whole thing is based on the presumption that evolution happens. You start with the false assumption that everything evolved from a common ancestor. Now you're looking for how did it do it? You're on the wrong track. It's like, how can we prove 2 + 2 is 5? Oh, you're never going to get there. It isn't 5, okay? There are no transitional fossils. What's an example of a transitional fossil? Archaeopteryx. Really, we'll talk more about Archaeopteryx later. But a transitional fossil is any fossilized remain of a life form that exhibits traits common to both ancestral groups, the group and its derived descendant group. Again, going from grandpa to today, supposed to be something in between. All of this is based on the phony teaching of geology that there's a geologic column. There is no geologic column. It doesn't exist. There are layers to the earth, no question, but they're all the same age, all shuffled up from Noah's flood. Geology, is the degree worth it? Well, let's see. Welcome to geology, Georgia, geology at University of Illinois, where my brother went, okay? You can get a degree in geology. Whoa, back in 2016, if you got a years of experience, you could make $100,000 in geology. Wow. First, you get a BS. We all know what that means. Then you get MS, that's more of the same. Then you get a PhD, that's piled higher and deeper. That's what they're getting, folks. Baloney. The puzzled look one gets when they realize they spent thousands of dollars to study and memorize something that is completely stupid. There is no geologic column. There are no index fossils. Sorry, you wasted your money. All that learning you did, all those hard names you pronounced, Jackson, you wasted your time memorizing all that stuff. All they are bones in the dirt from an animal that died in the flood in the days of Noah. There's no such thing as a Mesozoic era. There's no such thing as a geologic column. They said during the Scopes monkey trial, the lowest layers are obviously the oldest. Stop right there. No, they're not. Stop and think. If the top layer is younger, where did it come from? There is no geologic column. The whole thing is a joke. It's all based on circular reasoning. Now, you mentioned Archaeopteryx. I want to get back there. I had the slide number on here somewhere. Sorry about that. Oh, there it is. 2396, 2396. well, I got to cover this. Okay. The top 10 missing links. If you find a fossil in the dirt, all you really know is it died. You could not prove it had any kids, let alone different kids. And the bones you find in the dirt are able to do something no animal today can do. That ought to be fishy. Stop and think about it. Luther Sunderland he asked evolutionists all over what evidence they had for their theory. British Museum of Natural History has the largest fossil collection in the world. When he asked the senior paleontologist, Colin Patterson, he said, "Why didn't you show the missing links in your book you wrote?" He said, "I fully agree with your comments on the lack of evolutionary transitions in my book. If I knew of any, fossil or living, I would certainly have included them. I will lay it on the line. There's not one such fossil. And there hasn't been any found in the last 30, 40 years either. There aren't any. There are no missing links. The whole chain is missing. The absence of fossil evidence is a nagging problem for evolution," Stephen Gould said. "We know it's true, but we just can't find the evidence. So now they come up with a stupid punctuated equilibrium theory." Back in 1940, Goldschmidt said, "The first bird hatched from a reptile egg." See, in their brain, there's only two choices. Evolution happened slowly, gradualism, or evolution happened quickly, punctuated equilibria. Think critically, boys and girls. Here's the test question at the end of the chapter. Think critically. Number 23. The fossil record shows an organism evolved through many small changes over time. No, it doesn't. They're lying, okay? But let's go on here. Which theory best describes the organism's evolution? Gradualism or punctuated equilibria? They give the kids two choices, both of which are wrong. This is not thinking critically. This is being brainwashed. Did it happen slowly or did it happen quickly? They don't seem to think outside the box. It didn't happen at all. If I gave you a test and said, which is correct, 2 and 2 is 5 or 2 and 2 is 6? Come on now, put your answer down. I didn't give the right option. It's a shell game. They say, ask the geologist, where's the evidence for evolution? They'll say, well, the biologists have it. Ask the biologists, where's the evidence? Oh, the anthropologists have it. Ask them, where's the evidence? Well, the geologists have it. It's a shell game with one major difference. There's no P under any of them. Nobody has the evidence. Jesus said, you're of your father the devil. He speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own. He's a liar and the father of it. The Bible warned us in the last days there would be scoffers who would be willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood and the coming judgment of God. Knowing this, first there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts, and they're willingly ignorant, it says in 2 Peter 3, that by the word of God the heavens were of old. They don't understand the creation. And the world was overflowed with water and perished. The Bible says in Titus we're supposed to try to stop the gainsayers and whose mouths must be stopped. And you guys that are teaching that the geologic column exists, you ought to shut up or go to a private school, but don't teach that in public school. That's lying to the kids. There are no index fossils. There's no evidence the fossils you found had any kids at all. Best evidence for evolution? I'll debate any of you. Bring it on. Okay, go ahead, Jackson.
Perfect timing. I appreciate that, Dr. Dino. Thank you for your opening statement. I appreciate the visuals. That concludes the opening statements for both Jackson and Kent. So we're now moving into the 8-minute rebuttal round. Jackson, we are going to hand it over to you. I'll give you a 1-minute warning, just so you know, to kind of start winding things down. And go ahead. Floor is yours.
All right. I'm pretty sure Kent was saying there was no geologic column. I think he mentioned that several times. But I showed him last time, there are several locations where all the layers can be seen. The Ganymede Basin, the Tarim Basin, the Farah Basin, the Williston Basin. Now, index fossils are used, but to get absolute dates, you use radiometric dating. And where are the layers coming from? Well, the sedimentary rocks do get shifted around a lot. That's why they use igneous rock to date this coming up through the mantle. I mean, I can put different things in a jar and shake them up and they'll separate the layers. Put some toothpaste, some Rice Krispie treats, some, mayonnaise, and it'll separate the layers. Sure, but that's not necessarily how the column forms. Why are there no transitions today? Well, you could argue there are. You don't know what seal is going to look like in 10 million years, but it's not going to just give birth to something more aquatic than itself in one generation. That's just not going to happen. Now, the Grand Canyon, honestly, I'm tired of hearing about the Grand Canyon. Can we use a different canyon? I mean, like the Waimea Canyon in Kauai, that's a better example. Anyway. One of the pictures he showed of the fossilized animals wasn't buried in water. It was I think a herd of ancient rhinos buried in ash. So that didn't form in a flood. The fish swallowing fish, some of them may have been instantly covered, but oftentimes that's how they died. Fish bit off more than they could chew, and it basically choked to death. I've actually found a couple fish that way, that ate a big fish and it couldn't breathe or get it out, couldn't regurgitate it, and that's how it died. So it'll sink to the bottom. Maybe it'll get fossilized in the sediment down there. Maybe not. Let's see. Let me see. No, I can't prove an individual fossil had offspring, but I can prove it had parents. I can prove it was part of a population. It may not be ancestral to anything. It may be a cousin of what was ancestral to something, but anyway. I find your attack on education a little strange. I'm not sure about that, how to feel about that. But used quotes from 1988 and the 1970s in Gould's case about transitional fossils. There's been a huge amount discovered since then. Most of the fossils I showed in my presentation were not discovered until after those quotes were made. Now, punctuated equilibrium and gradual change over time can happen at the same time. It's a little bit of both. In separate cases, if you're in a suddenly new environment, you're going to have a more selective pressure to change more rapidly over the generations than if you were in a constant environment. Like the Tuatara is in a constant set environment, so it's not going to have any pressure to change. But say a seal that lives in two different environments, it's semi-aquatic, so it might change faster, for example. That's a bad example, but it's one. Let's see if there's anything else. And fossils do form today. We found dodo subfossils, moa subfossils in New Zealand and Mauritius. So, of course, fossils form today. There's still volcanoes erupting. There's still floods happening. There's still anaerobic bogs. So I think that's most of what I wrote down. I think that's everything I wrote down. So I'll hand it back.
All right, I appreciate that rebuttal there, Jackson. Let me just get to the timer. Okay, so we got a few minutes to spare there that we can throw into the audience Q&A, because as always, the audience Q&As are extremely fun. We've got a lot of great questions. So we're going to hand it over now to Dr. Dino. You have up to 8 minutes for your rebuttal whenever you're ready.
2 Peter 3, it says, the world was overflowed with water and it perished. The flood created all that. Genesis chapter 7, this is the story of the flood. In the 600th year of Noah's life, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up. What does this mean? Well, the Bible clearly teaches that when God first made the world, there was water under the crust of the earth. There is still a lot of water in the crust of the earth. We know that. Otherwise, you couldn't get geysers and hydrothermal vents, etc. But I cover on my video number 2 what the original creation was like. Why did they live to be 900? But there was water under the crust of the earth. The Bible says the fountains of the great deep broke open. That the earth cracked up like an eggshell, and the water went shooting out, which means once the water leaves from underneath, the crust of the earth is going to settle back in to the cavity. The same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up. So the water went shooting out along these cracks during Noah's flood. A cubic foot of rock weighs about 160 pounds, depending on what type of rock. So 10 miles of rock, if the crust was that thick, would put 8.5 million pounds of pressure per square foot. That would launch rocks out into space, 30 tons per square inch. Yeah, anyway. So the earth, everybody agrees, I think, the earth is broken up into plates, and the plates are still moving. I think that's leftover remnant from the flood. Usually most of the earthquakes and volcanoes are along those fault lines. San Andreas Fault, Hayward Fault, New Madrid Fault, etc. America has hundreds of fault lines, okay? And when the earth moves, you get an earthquake. At the start of the flood, the subterranean water rushed out of these cracks, and the crust would sink in and then slide apart if places underneath lift up. If the basalt comes up a little bit into the crack, if the crack gets wide enough, the basalt will lift up just from geothermal pressure, geologic pressure, and it would cause the crust of the earth to slide away. So as that comes up, the crust is going to slide. That's why we have folded, wrinkled mountains. If you push a piece of carpeting into the wall, it'll start folding up. All over the world, folded mountains are found. It's best explained by lateral movement of the crust. These layers all formed in one big flood. The crust of the earth is still sliding around, and bent rock layers and folded mountains are found all over the world. Why do we say these layers are different ages? If you bend rock, it cracks. But if you look at these rocks, even under the microscope, there's no internal cracks. All the layers were soft mud, and all of them were bent at the same time. Go get some Play-Doh and make 10 layers of different colors of Play-Doh and bend it, and then let it harden. That's what you'll get. That's what you'll see when you look at these rocks. The cracks of the earth, the fault lines, were moving around. San Andreas Fault, Hayward Fault. Not all the water is gone. There's still a lot of water trapped under the crust of the earth. That's why we have hydrothermal vents. There's millions, maybe even tens of millions of them in the bottom of the ocean. There are geysers all over shooting water up into the sky. Okay, so the scoffers are ignorant of that flood. That's the answer for all the layers to the earth. They're also ignorant of the coming judgment of God. God's reserved this place unto fire and fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men, the Bible says. So two people look at the same thing, come to very different conclusions. I look at the rock layers and say, wow, there was a big flood. Jackson looks at the rock layers and says, wow, they're all different ages. Where are you never answered the question. Nobody's ever answered the question. If the top layer is younger, where did it come from? Moving it from here to here is not changing the age of it. Every speck of dirt on the planet's the same age, unless it might be 6,000 or 6 trillion, but it's the same age. Somebody says that's a 6. No, that's a 9. This is confusing. How many lines are there? 4 or 5? 3. Okay. Is this a vase or 2 faces? We look at Grand Canyon or any canyon. The evolutionist says, wow, it formed slowly by a little bit of water and lots of time. Or the canyon in Hawaii. I've been to that one too. Creationist says, no, it formed quickly by lots of water and a little bit of time. And you guys always try to erase the line between those two. There is no geologic column. It does not exist anywhere on the earth. These folded rock layers are indication of rapid bending while they were all still soft. Okay, I wanted to get to, right here. Yeah. Slide number. I'm all eating up my time here. I didn't have, here we go. Slide number 367. Okay, Alt-DV, 367, enter. This textbook says, you look back through hundreds of millions of years. No, you don't. You look down at a hole in the ground. I went down there, same date at the bottom as it was at the top. If you built a dam across Grand Canyon, a large lake would form behind it, a really large lake. Some of the water from Wyoming drains through Grand Canyon down there. There's Grand Canyon, Arizona. I didn't realize, Jackson, you didn't like that one. I'll pick the Hawaiian one next time. But it's the same concept. Here's Grand Canyon. It cuts right across what's called the Kaibab Plateau. In that red box, there's an elevated area that's about 7,000 feet above sea level, and Grand Canyon cuts across it. It's actually a gigantic dam. The snow line tells the story. That white is the snow, high elevation snow line. It's got a gash cutting right across it called Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon enters over here at less than 3,000 foot elevation, flows downhill, like all rivers flow downhill, 277 miles come out the other side. It's a breached dam. It enters at less than 3,000 feet, and the top of that dam is 7,000 or 8,000 feet. Rivers don't flow uphill. If you filled a Grand Canyon back in, this big lake would fill in behind it. The top of this ridge is much higher than the bottom. The river only runs through the bottom, and the top is higher than where the river enters the canyon by 4,000 feet. All these canyons, all these layers formed in one big flood, and probably within 100 years after the flood, the lakes would fill up just from rainwater. And what happens when any lake gets too full? It finds the lowest point and cuts a notch and drains the lake. Rivers don't flow uphill. There's no delta. We do demonstrations showing how Grand Canyon formed rapidly. That's what the lakes would look like if you plugged up Grand Canyon today. The lake would go clear back to Colorado. Grand Lake would be 5,000 feet deep. As the water ran off, it left behind what we call today Monument Valley, probably formed in a couple of weeks while the water's running off quickly. Kaibab Plateau, 7,000 or 8,000 foot elevation. River enters the canyon less than 3,000 feet. Going to wash out the dam. Dams wash out all the time. It doesn't wash away the whole thing. It cuts a notch and drains the water out. Grand Canyon is a notch cut in a giant dam called the Kaibab Plateau. So you guys are saying the layers are different ages. This is right south of us here, 20 miles in Bruton. Can you see that gash over there? Anybody want to guess what happened here? Somebody had a lake on their property, got too full, found the lowest point, cut a notch, and drained the lake. Duh. Happens all the time. Anybody want to guess what's going to happen here if they don't plug that leak? They got a problem, don't they? There's a dam washed out. The Tom Sauk Reservoir broke a piece of the dam, lost all the water in 10 minutes. Enormous erosion down the side. So I think you guys are mistaken about the geologic column. It doesn't exist. Therefore, there cannot be any transitional fossils. There are no index fossils. The purpose of the debate was for you to prove transitional fossils provide evidence for evolution. My point would be no fossil proves it had any children. And all these layers that we see formed rapidly. Grand Canyon's a washed out spillway is all it is. There are barbed canyons. Watch this now. On the south side of the Kaibab Plateau, the rivers come together at less than 90-degree angles, acute angles, and they keep going the same general direction. Almost all river patterns are that way. But if you look at the north side, the water's running north, hits the main channel, and turns around and comes back.
1 minute.
That's because it's the backside of the dam. As the lake is draining, the water runs off the dam, hits the channel, turns around, and comes back out the other way. Indicating Grand Canyon is a breached dam, not millions of years. Can the rocks tell a story? They sure can. They can tell that it happened very quickly. All those layers are formed rapidly, and I resent you guys using everybody's tax dollars to teach the kids that those layers are different ages, when all over the world, petrified trees are found standing up, connecting the layers. Your whole religion, Jackson, is based on the false idea that the layers are different ages. How can they be? Please answer that when you get a chance. How can the top layer be younger? Where did it come from? Go ahead.
All right. I appreciate that rebuttal there, Kent. That concludes the opening statements and the 8-minute rebuttals. Great debate so far, gentlemen. We are now moving into the discussion portion of this debate. Let's keep this focused on one topic at a time, as we always do, and discuss some of the points brought up in the openings and the rebuttals. Jackson, why don't we hand it over to you, since Dr. Hovind just ended with his rebuttal, and we will let you start the conversation off. Go ahead.
All right. Before I forget, you showed at the very first part of your presentation the ice firmament over the Earth before the flood, with held up by the Meissner effect, I think you said before. There's a problem with that. Ice isn't magnetic. It's only very slightly diamagnetic. And the Earth's core is not a superconductor. So there's no way this firmament could float due to the Meissner effect. And blocking
Donnie, we're going to do one topic at a time. Do I get to answer that before he goes on?
Absolutely. We'll hand it over to Kent.
Okay. In my seminar, I say the Bible teaches there was water above the firmament, and it says very clearly in Genesis chapter 1, the birds fly in the firmament. So that would be the air. So the Bible teaches there was water above the firmament. The Jews have always taught there was a layer of ice 2 or 3 fingers thick above the atmosphere. And I said it could have been held up by the magnetic field, the Meissner effect, or by air pressure like an inflatable building. And the Earth does have a magnetic field. That's how your compass points north. What do you mean it doesn't have a magnetic field? Of course we do. Go ahead.
Yes, but it's not a superconducting magnet. It's just
okay. That air pressure held it up. Okay.
All right. Well, there's a problem with that, because only 3 fingers thick of ice covering the entire globe would be such a delicate structure that it could never just hold itself together, I think.
But you don't believe that, but you do believe we all came from a rock?
No, I don't believe it came from a rock.
Okay. Go ahead. Next point.
All right. Let's see. Do you believe in feathered dinosaurs? Some creationists do, some don't. I'm just curious.
Did you say feathered dinosaurs?
Yes.
No, I think that's a ridiculous idea.
All right. Can I share my screen real quick?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Jackson. 1 second.
All right. I'm getting it up here.
All right, you're shared, Jackson.
All right. These are some more conclusive dinosaur fossils with feather impression. This is Tyanuraptor, about 4 feet long. This is Xinhuanlong. You can see the wings here. It's about a 6-foot theropod. But most conclusive of all, this is Eutyrannus, a 30-foot tyrannosaur. You can see it had 3 specimens had impressions of feathers, about 8 inches long. So I think it's pretty conclusive that dinosaurs did have feathers.
No, I think it's pretty conclusive that what you showed as a fossil may have had feathers. It may be, there's other ways that is produced. Some are faked, of course. We see them coming from China all the time that are completely fake, where they carve the feathers in there, but it's supposed it's legitimate. The Bible teaches that before the flood came, the people lived to be 900 years old, and probably everything was much bigger much bigger. I think you're going to find pterodactyl fossils that probably have a 30-foot wingspan. They'd have a hard time flying today because the air is too thin. But if you had a canopy above and the whole earth was pressurized a little bit more, say add 10% or something, they could fly because the air is thicker. I can swim through the water, but I can't swim through the air. I can't flap fast enough. So I think you'll find fossil dragonflies, 3-foot wingspan. Fossil cockroaches, 18 inches long. I think everything was bigger in the fossils that we find, indicate something was different about the air. Giant dinosaurs are found by the thousands, the fossils are, and they have small nostrils. How did they breathe? Had to have richer air, and I think most folks agree from the fossil amber that the air used to be 32% oxygen instead of 21 like it is today. That's amber, air bubbles in amber are 32% oxygen. If you increase the oxygen concentration and increase the air pressure, smaller nostrils would work fine. You could run 100 miles without getting tired. So I think that what you may be showing is a giant bird. How do you know that's a dinosaur turning into a bird? You may have found just a fossil, if the feathers are legitimate, a big bird. Go ahead.
All right, well, 30-foot tyrannosaur is probably not a bird, in my opinion. But the reason those insects and sauropods would get so big in the Carboniferous period is where the insects were found. The oxygen level was much higher than it is today. That's the reason they got big then. As for sauropods and theropods getting big, they had an efficient breathing system, air sacs in the vertebrae, and kind of like a system similar to birds. And it's by gaps in the vertebrae. And yeah, so anyway, that's my answer.
Okay, you keep mentioning the Carboniferous period and the Jurassic period. Those don't exist. Jackson, you never answered the question. How can any of the layers be different ages? Is this material coming from outer space? Yes or no? Where's it coming from?
Well, the KT boundary came from outer space. It's got a lot of iridium in it, which is rare on Earth. Had to come from an asteroid or a comet or something. But
okay.
But the layers, the sedimentary layers, are mostly getting shifted around. But the igneous layers are coming up through the mantle, and when they're set, they're lithified. They have a set parent-daughter ratio, and gradually that changes over time.
But you still didn't answer the question. Whether it's igneous or sedimentary, if it's coming up out of the mantle, it's still the same age. It's been down there. If the whole Earth formed 4.6 billion years ago, every speck of dirt on Earth is 4.6 billion years old, unless it came from outer space from meteors, which are very, very rare. But let's say there's a tiny bit of the iridium layer. Okay, I'll give you that. But you're saying the layers, how can the Carboniferous period be different than the Jurassic period? Every speck of dirt in both of those layers did not come from outer space. Therefore, they're the same age. Shuffling it to a new location does not change the age. If you shuffle a deck of cards, the top card is not younger. There is no geologic column, Jackson. You wasted your money learning that stuff.
I didn't spend any money learning that. I just Googled it. There are plenty of places where it is. Okay. So I didn't waste any money on that. But yeah, the sedimentary rock, that's the reason it's not dated, is because it's mostly shifted around through the rock cycle.
And how is it a different age? Shifted around does not make it a different age. Is the top layer younger? If so, how so? Please tell me.
I'm telling you, that's why they don't date sedimentary rock. It's igneous rock they date. It's coming up from the mantle. It's not a set parent-daughter ratio.
It's still the same age if it came out of the mantle or came from next door. Erosion, it doesn't matter. It's all shuffled. There is no geologic column. Your whole religion is based on the geologic column, and it doesn't exist. That's the Bible for the evolutionist. I understand. That's your Bible, and you memorized it. You did a good job. Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Archaeozoic. Yay, proud of you. Here you get an A. But it's all baloney. It doesn't exist. It's not even common sense. The layers are all the same age. How can they not be?
You're saying the layers aren't in that order anywhere, or they aren't the same age? Because they conclusively are in that order.
Well, there may be, I mean, say there's 15 different layers, depending how you want to count them to the geologic column. Just by random shuffling, of course, you may find a couple spots in North Dakota or Antarctica where they are in that order. I bet if I shuffle 10,000 decks of cards, I might find one or two that got all the hearts together. So it's a pure accident. It's random. The fact is, just think about the concept. How can the top layer be younger than the bottom layer? Where did it come from? I've never had an atheist or an evolutionist answer that, and you're avoiding it right now, Jackson. How can it be younger Whether it came up through the mantle or came from next door through erosion, it's still the same age.
I'm trying to explain a set amount. Let's use uranium lead dating. A set amount of uranium-238 is going to come up, and a set amount of lead is going to come up. Now, these are going to change over time through radioactive decay. So they are, I mean, in a way, you could say they're the same age in a roundabout way, but they are, I mean, it's hard to explain. It's very hard to explain.
It's impossible to explain. The fact that there's uranium-238, carbon-14, all these different elements are in there. Sure, there are radioactive elements that decay at a rate that we can observe today. We don't know if the rate's always been the same, but I'm not going to argue that. The fact is, some of the rock layers have different amounts of uranium-238 to lead, decays to lead, than others. But you're missing the point. Where did this layer come from?
The mantle.
The mantle. What is the mantle different age than the crust?
I'm trying to explain. It has.
Yeah, I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, it's hard for me to explain this because
I believe it.
Intentionally not trying to get it is the thing. It's a set amount of uranium-238 is going to come up. A set amount of lead-206 or 7, whatever, is going to come up. And from that, it's going to decay once it's lithified, and it's going to show a different age once it was set. That's why they don't use sedimentary rock. They use igneous.
It doesn't show a different age. It shows a different amount has decayed. But the layer, whether it came up through the mantle or came from next door by erosion, every speck of dirt, that's my point. There is no geologic column. It doesn't exist. There are layers to the earth, no question. I'm living in a gravel pit with hundreds of them here, no question. But they're all the same age, whether it's 6,000 or 6 trillion. You guys don't. You don't understand. How can the layers be different ages? Where is it coming from? Simple question. Nobody ever answers that. So it came up through the mantle. Okay, well then is the mantle a different age than the crust? I thought they all formed 4.6 billion years ago.
They have different ratios of the elements in them. That's what I'm saying. They're not necessarily that they're different ages. It's different ratios.
Okay, I agree. There's different ratios of different elements in the layers. I agree. Are the layers different ages? If so, how?
We're just not going to agree on this point. I don't think going back and forth is going to help.
Okay. I'll take that as a cop-out on your part. Go ahead.
All right. You can take it as a cop-out. But let's see. How do you explain evolutionary predictions like Tiktaalik being in the Devonian or Tetrapteryx, the predicted fossil, being found 100 years later?
I would explain that with what's called grant money. They send somebody out there and say, please find us a fossil that goes intermediate. But the bigger point is, if you find a fossil that looked like it was intermediate between two, I bet the motorcycles that have 3 wheels, they look like an intermediate between a motorcycle with 2 wheels and a car with 4 wheels. They're not intermediate. They're designed to be 3-wheeled, and there's some designed to be 2-wheeled and some designed to be 4-wheeled. They're designed for that. So if you found a fossil that looked halfway between, this and this, you don't know that it isn't just something that went extinct. You wouldn't know it's the father of anybody. You wouldn't know it had any kids. You don't know it's transitional. And no animal today is able to do this. We got a lot of monkeys and baboons and chimpanzees today having babies. Why don't they make another human? Only this time, let's watch it. Why can it only happen long ago and far away? This is fairy tale stuff. Evolution is a fairy tale for grown-ups. That's all it is. There's not a shred of evidence that any animal has ever produced anything different than its kind. God said 20 times in the first 7 chapters, they'll bring forth after their kind. That's all we've ever seen. That's science. Science is what we can see, study, test, demonstrate, observe. I love science. Evolution is not part of science. Evolution is a religious belief. You believe the layers are different ages with no evidence. You believe animals in the past could change to something else, even though today they can't. It's a religion. Jackson, I wish you'd wake up and see this. Give your heart to the Lord, get saved, and join the real crowd that's going to win.
I think there could be a God. I think he would use naturalistic processes, but I've noticed that you talk a lot, but you say the same thing repeatedly, I think.
Because I'm right.
So, you can say it once, not 10 times.
Okay, I taught math for 15 years. I taught kids 2 + 2 is 4. I bet they were teaching that 2,000 years ago. It doesn't change. Truth doesn't change. The truth is dogs produce dogs. That's the truth. I'll keep saying it.
and they're not going to produce anything else in one generation.
Bingo. But did the original amoeba that chart showed, did that produce something different? I mean, your chart shows the amoeba turned it into all kinds of stuff. So apparently they were able to do it in the past, but they can't do it now. That's not science.
Over millions of generations, not one.
Oh, okay. Then it somehow changed to something else. That's what you just got done saying, over millions of generations. That is a belief. That is a religion. That is not science. I showed you earlier the chart, showing all the animals going back to an amoeba. Well, then, the amoeba had to change to something else. Amoeba turned into a whale in your religion. I don't believe that. I think it's baloney. Here it is, right here. Slide number 755. Alt DV 755. Do you believe these trees of life represent the reality that animals started off like an amoeba and turned into, some of them to an octopus, some of them to a jellyfish, some to a pine tree? Oh, some of them turned to a shark.
I think I think I showed one of the fossils. It wouldn't be an amoeba. It would be something like Bicellum brazeri, one of the first multicellular organisms.
Well, that's another whole problem to get into. How do you go from single cell to multi-cell? Before you get there, how do you go from non-life to single cell? Those are all stages of evolution you guys have no explanation for. They're essential for your religion, but it's nothing but a religion. You believe it because you've been taught it.
Well,
and I'm sorry, you were taught wrong.
They did an experiment with single-celled algae, and they introduced a paramecium, and over, I think, 700 generations, they produced a multicellular colony with a cell membrane over it, and they reproduced by basically budding off more multicellular organisms.
Okay, hold it now. This started off with a living organism, introduced an enemy like a paramecium. They all locked arms where the paramecium couldn't eat them. The Navy SEALs are taught that. Everybody lock arms, get together. Now you got a big crowd where you can float together as a raft, okay? So they're still single-celled algae. They might have grown a shell around them of some kind of protective shell, but if you look carefully, it never did become a multicellular creature. It was still a bunch of single creatures getting together. We got people getting together in crowds all the time, and that's not evidence that it happened in nature. You can believe that if you want, but going from single cell to multi-celled is a giant leap. But they put the drawings on the chart here, this way, and say, kid, look at this. Single-celled creature at the bottom turned to a shark. This is propaganda. This is not science. I don't care if you want to believe that stuff. I do resent paying to have that taught to the kids. That's not science. That's imagination. And finding a fossil in a rock layer, like you said, how did they predict they would find one here? Government grant money, probably, because please go get out there till you find one. There's a lot of people digging around looking for that. My dog digs around looking for bones too in the dirt.
So it's just a conspiracy. The feathered dinosaurs are fake, and it's a conspiracy when they find one they predict.
Well, some of them have been fake. You would agree with that, I think. Plenty of those have been exposed as fake. But if they find a real dinosaur, if they find a real animal that has feathers on it, I'd call it a bird.
Even a 30-foot Utaranus?
I think a 30-foot pterodactyl could fly with greater air pressure and greater oxygen. Sure. I think they find fossil beavers. They find fossil beavers 8 feet long. Biggest one today is 2.5 feet. Just about everything in the fossils that have been found of animals that they can identify, the counterpart today is much smaller.
But you're saying a little tyrannosaur is a bird.
Well, anybody thinks a dinosaur turned to a bird needs to go see a shrink.
Well, you just
what
said
would be the advantage? You think the T-Rex turning to a chicken is an advantage? You know how dumb our chickens are?
Anything, it went extinct at the end of the Cretaceous.
Well, we never see any reptile produce a non-reptile baby.
And you're never going to.
Well, then take this chart out of the book.
You're not going to see it in 1 generation or even 100 generations. It's going to take a long time.
Or a million or trillion generations. You're not going to see it at all. Therefore, it's not science. It's religion.
You can see speciation in real time. It's not much of a leap to say a new genera can form, maybe a new family, and why not go up the list over time?
Well, to say it happened by drawing lines on paper, connecting them, this is deceitful. You do not know that shark had a common ancestor that was an amoeba, common ancestor with a clam. What else they got in there? A starfish. And humans You believe humans and whales have a common ancestor? They drew a line here, putting them together. Jackson, do you believe
everything on Earth is related? So,
okay, so for the record, you believe humans and dinosaurs have a common ancestor. Is that right?
everything has a common ancestor.
Okay.
As far as we know.
So humans and worms have a common ancestor too, right? You're related to a worm?
You're trying to make me say something that sounds stupid, but
it is stupid, Jackson. You don't need any help on that. It is stupid.
All right. Well, everything on Earth is related. Genetics proves that.
I think everything on Earth was created by a really smart creator, and all the different life forms we have.
You can have
I
both.
think they're designed to do what they do. The sharks are designed to swim in the water, and we're designed to walk on the land. I think I can give God the glory when I see one of his creatures. You guys can't do it.
Well, what was an acanthodian, the shark precursor that I showed?
There's no precursor to anything. Just because you find a fossil that looks like it's not quite shark yet, okay, maybe something went extinct. If you found a fossil three-wheeler, you would say, oh, wow, it's turning into a four-wheeler. No, it's not. It's a three-wheeler.
Well, I think that's a pretty bad example. I mean, they don't reproduce. They don't.
Well, okay. My point would be, the title of the debate, are there transitional fossils that support evolution? The answer is no. There are no transitional fossils to begin with. Even all those you showed, if they're all legitimate and they're being interpreted correctly, which is a big question, but if they are, anybody, a freshman law student could say, Your Honor, he found an animal that went extinct. That's not, you don't know that's the grandma of anybody.
So we're throwing out all of forensic science?
No, we throw out all the fossil evidence they use for evolution. I love forensic science. I love science. But evolution isn't part of it. Evolution is a fairy tale. It's part of a religion that you guys have sneaked into the school system. And now you're making all the kids learn that.
I mean, you've said yourself, you've spoken in public schools. I mean,
yeah, many times.
Yeah, aren't you kind of doing the same thing, teaching your beliefs in the public schools?
No. I say all the evidence shows dogs produce dogs. If you wish to believe something other than that, you just left science and went to religion. Science shows us dogs make dogs, sharks make sharks, no exceptions. These lines, every line on this paper is imagination. It's baloney. They believe it happened. What now?
Except for genetics and fossils.
The kinetic fossil, is that what you said?
Except for genetics and fossils.
Well, genetics indicate a really complex gene code. I bet you'd find Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft Word have thousands of identical lines of code. Does that mean they all came from Morse code, or are they evolving into something else, or that's the line of code that you write with? I bet both of them have the same spell check, take you to the same dictionary. So if God designed all the creatures and gave similar lines of code for this one's got to make an arm. It's going to be two bones, a radius and ulna, and the flexors and extenders and biceps and triceps and deltoid. Okay, I think you might find the same similar muscles and bones in lots of different animals. It works great. It's a neat system. It works good for the dog, for the cat, for the whale to swim with. It doesn't prove a common ancestor. It might prove a common designer. But I'm not demanding that be taught. You guys are demanding that your religion be taught, so I think the burden of proof's on you.
Well, I'm not demanding anything. I'm a civilian. But, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a bad argument to say that genetics doesn't count because computer programs are similar. I mean, again, they're not reproducing. They're not acquiring endogenous retroviruses, things like that can be traced back.
Well, I'm giving an example anybody can understand. I agree. You add in reproduction, now it gets a whole lot more complicated. If the computers could reproduce, whoa, how would you do that? How do you tell if it's a boy or a girl? I don't know. Let me look at mine here. I don't even know where to look. But so the fact that it's just an example how that lines of computer code are primitive compared to the DNA code. Sure. The information in one single cell, like an amoeba, is more complex than the space shuttle. Then you guys think it happened by chance. That's fine. I don't care what you believe.
It didn't necessarily happen by chance.
You want to teach it. That's what I care about.
I mean, I think there could have been a God guiding the process. I've said that many times.
Right. So you think God could have used evolution? Do you think God could have done it without using evolution?
Sure, he could have, but he didn't. The evidence says he didn't.
And you're sure of that? All right. Well, yeah. Audience Q&A.
Sorry, guys, I was on mute. Yeah, actually, we had 25 seconds left on the timer, so perfect timing to end the discussion. and go into some closing statements. Been a fantastic debate. We've got a great, lively chat, and that was a very lively discussion. So I appreciate it. Lots of fun. Definitely an epic debate. So let's do this. Just so you guys feel like you were able to address all the points you wanted to and kind of wrap up your thoughts, let's hand it to Jackson. Jackson, take a 5-minute concluding statement. And then we'll give Dr. Dino the chance for his 5-minute concluding statement. Then we'll do some audience questions.
Well, I didn't know we were doing another geologic column debate. You mentioned that about 50 times, I think. But I think there are definitely transitional fossils. I mean, it's hard to explain the whale fossils that are walking, have legs, but have anatomical features only found in cetaceans. So, and these predictions, I mean, you can't just say it's grant money. They're faking everything. Those feathered dinosaurs, they aren't real. They were found in China. There's one that was found in Germany, Sierra. There's been a couple found with quill knobs here in the U.S. So that's not a great example. But it's been kind of a little bit of a combative debate, but it stayed civil still, even so, at the same time. But yeah, I enjoy these debates. So I'd like to debate you again, or, you know, that's basically all I have to say.
All right. I appreciate that concluding statement there, Jackson. We are going to, yes, and of course, it gets passionate at times. These are important topics, but overall, you guys keep it cordial and a very sophisticated discussion. So I appreciate it. Very easy to moderate. So, Kent, we're going to hand it over to you, my good man, and you have 5 minutes for a concluding statement.
Okay, well, I will stand by my guns. So when you find a fossil in the dirt, all you really know is it died. You can't prove it had any children. And in a court of law, every fossil you showed tonight would be thrown out in an honest court of law, if such a one exists, okay? You could not prove it had any offspring. You could not prove it had offspring that were different. No animal today can do what you're claiming the fossils could do over millions of generations, okay? Well, let's take bacteria. They produce generation every 20 minutes. They've been trying for a long time to turn that bacteria to something else. It hadn't worked. Why would bones in the dirt do something no animal today can do? And it just doesn't happen. Let me go to 2418 here, okay? I got about 10 million slides here. Okay. I'll debate any atheist on the best evidence for evolution on a few simple assumptions. They go first, one topic at a time. Okay? Equal time for each side and no interrupting. That was gracious tonight. Thank you, Jackson. I want them to give their real name and show their real face. No cursing. Either side can post it or sell it. But intro comments, but don't edit the debate. All you atheists, come on, look at this. I'm an atheist. Debate me. Okay, I accept the challenge. I'm an atheist. Debate me. All right, I accept. There's probably no God. Stop worrying. Enjoy life. I do enjoy life, and I'm not worried. My sins are forgiven because of what Jesus did. What a strange one there. Atheist, debating atheist. When my religious family members debate me with me, they're not debating me. They're debating all the atheist authors whose literature I've consumed. You got poisoned, kid, okay? I was atheist until I realized I am God. Oh, that must be Mr. Nelson, R. and Ra. Did you see this one, Matt? Graduated from SpongeBob University. Yeah, there we go. There we go. So I want them to show their face, not a talking dot like we did last time, Donnie. I told you, if I debate, what's his name again? David Neff. Keep your face on there, David. I do mine. Show your real face, Pelagia. There you are, the real Pelagia, not with all the muscles on the T-shirt. This guy. Logic, he calls himself, no logic at all there. So many atheists, target-rich environment. So I'll stand by my gun. There are no transitional fossils. No fossil would count anyway. There is no geologic column, which is everything you started off with, Jackson, referring to the geologic column. You said, how does this tie in? You kept referring to the Devonian period, Silurian, all this kind of stuff. It doesn't exist. Does not exist. There's no evidence from any field of science for evolution. None. So I rest my case. I think I won. Go ahead.
All right, I appreciate that concluding statement there, Dr. Hovind, Jackson, and Kent. Thank you for a fantastic, very enjoyable debate. Let's get into some audience questions now because we have a ton of great questions. And as we always do, what we'll do in order to move along smoothly is whoever the question is for will make sure they get the last word. All right, let's go all the way back to the beginning here. First question that came in from, let's see here. From Brother Timothy. So, Timothy, I appreciate the question. This one is for you, Jackson. He asks, why do we find fossilized footprints of Tiktaalik in layers 10 million years older than the fossil itself?
Sorry. That's actually not Tiktaalik. It's found in Poland. The footprints show an impression similar to that of something like Acanthostega or Ichthyostega with more than 5 digits. So it's still a transitional species. Might have evolved earlier than we thought, but it's still a transition. So that would be my answer.
All right. I appreciate it, Jackson. Kent, did you want anything to add to that?
Well, I think the question itself reveals the fallacy of logic here. Why do we find fossil footprints in layers 10 million years older than the fossil? That, again, goes back to my question. How do you know these layers are different ages? This is just, where's this layer coming from? Nobody's ever answered that. Jackson, let's have a debate on that. How do you know the top layer's younger? You keep referring to the layers like they're different ages. How can one be different age? So I agree, footprints would be found all over the place during the flood. Let's say it took 6 months to kill everybody. I don't know how long it took, but Noah was in the ark for over a year. So the water would be going up and down with the tides, coming higher and higher with each tide as this water underneath is escaping to the surface and the crust is settling in. So probably a lot of animals ran around in the mud looking for the high ground and eventually drowned. So their fossil footprints might be found and many more layers deposited on top, and then you find the fossil. Not a problem for the flood model. Noah's flood could explain all the fossil foot. Birds are generally found in the upper layers. Well, yeah, birds are the last ones to drown in a flood. They got hollow feathers and hollow bones. The fact that birds are found on higher layers than reptiles does not prove one evolved to the other. That's how they would float. Hydrologic sorting. That's the order they would die. Birds can fly around till they run out of gas. Clams are usually found at the bottom. Well, duh, clams are already at the bottom when the flood starts. Of course, they're the first ones buried. So I think it's a much better explanation for all the gradual fossils in the order that they find them. A much better explanation is hydrologic sorting or the habitat they live in. Birds are found on top, clams are found at the bottom. Yeah, doesn't prove they're related, doesn't prove one changed to the other. That's how they would sort automatically. Anyway, go ahead.
Well,
thank you for that. Yeah, go ahead, Jackson.
We're back to that problem of pterosaurs. Why are they not found at the top also? And even sauropods and theropods had hollow bones. Like I was saying, they should be relatively high up with the modern mammals, and they're not. But I forget what other was what the other point. But so back to you.
Well, his point there, why aren't certain fossils found? Well, the people who are looking for them, digging up the fossils, already have a preconceived idea that the layers are different ages, and there's their problem. I can go out and dig up fossils. We got thousands of them in our museum here, and I look at it, wow, evidence that died quickly. How many fossils form today? Probably none. It takes special conditions for a fossil to form. Fossils are found by the trillions. That would indicate there was a big flood. Anyway.
Or a lot of small ones.
Or a lot of small floods, right. A lot of small floods all over the world.
Yes.
Okay. Second Peter said they'd be willingly ignorant of that flood. On display here. Go ahead.
All right, good back and forth on that question, gentlemen. So this one comes in from God and Gun Klinger. I put it up on screen for us to kind of look at together. He says, why are there a greater variety of species in the past and extinctions today? Question is for Jackson, he says. Go ahead, Jackson.
Well, there hasn't always been. Like in the Precambrian period, we just had Dickinsonia, a few little jellyfish-looking things here and there. Some weird trilateral symmetric animals aren't around anymore. So there wasn't really a lot of variety then. So that's pretty much my answer.
Go ahead, Kent.
Well, I think God created all kinds of amazing animals, and some have probably gone extinct, either due to man's hunting or because of the climate change after the flood. Now the oxygen concentration is not as great, the air pressure is not as great, the canopy overhead's gone. So the giant animals, they can't live long enough. Reptiles never stop growing, but to get to be 60 feet long, they need to live a long time. And I think before the flood, the reptiles could live to be live long enough to get 60 or 80 feet long. Today, they can't do it, so they might have gone extinct, might not even reach reproductive age. in the new destroyed world after the flood. So I think it goes back to 2 Peter chapter 3. The scoffers are ignorant of the creation and the flood. That flood changed everything.
So
Go ahead, Jackson.
Dinosaurs are just large chameleons. Like a triceratops is a chameleon, basically, that just lived a long time.
I don't know if a triceratops is an overgrown chameleon. It may be the triceratops is some type of reptile. The word dinosaur means terrible lizard. So technically, to be classed as a dinosaur, it has to be a reptile, not a bird. But yeah, there may have been something similar to the animals we have today, the three-horned lizards that you can buy at the store. So I don't know if that's the one that turned into triceratops, but something similar to that. It may be the one. We'll see.
All right, Jackson, if you want a quick final word, since that was your question, then we'll move on to the next one here.
No, I don't think I have anything to add to that.
Okay, so this one comes in from Mike Jones. This is a $10 super chat. Let me get it up on screen here in 3, 2, 1. The chat is very lively right now. So Mike Jones says, okay, so it's a question for you, Kent. He asks, do creationists limit God's capacity by saying biological evolution did not happen and is not possible? Is God allowed to create the variety of life we see today through evolution if he wanted to?
Oh, sure. God could do it any way he wanted, but that's not what the Bible teaches, number one. It's not what the Bible reveals. And to use the evolution process to get what we have today would be a really cruel, idiotic, stupid God. Doesn't he know where can't he make it right first time? Evolution's based on a whole bunch of animals dying. Evolution's a religion of death. If you got a bunch of animals and one evolves a little better than the rest, now the rest of them got to die or this ain't going to work, because the new improved species is going to be blended back into the population. So evolution requires the death and suffering of billions and billions of inferior species. Let's go see Adolf Hitler for more on that. So no, God would not use not the God that I worship would not use a process like that. No, he didn't need to. He made it right first time. What we're seeing today is a destroyed creation. Not at all what God made a perfect one and man wrecked it. The question is simple. Did man bring death into the world, like the Bible says, or did death bring man into the world, like evolution says? So I would not want to worship a God who used suffering and death and cruelty and misfits and billions of animals dying because they're inferior. I don't think there's any evidence for it, number one, and I don't think that's the kind of God anybody would want to worship.
All right, I appreciate that answer there, Kent, and I appreciate the question. Mike, Jackson, anything you wanted to add to that one?
Yeah, well, evidently God in the Bible didn't create everything perfect the first time because he flooded the earth to reset it. So the answer doesn't really make any sense.
Well, God made it perfect, Jackson. God made it perfect, and 1,600 years later, man had messed it up. So the flood had to come because man's problem, not God. God made a perfect one. They messed it up. I bet General Motors makes some nice cars, and people can wreck them if they want.
I appreciate it there, Kent. So here's the next one that comes in from T-Rock. So this one is for you, Jackson. I got it up on screen here for you to have a look at. So he says, Jackson, can you name a fossil-bearing layer that is dated by radiometric methods? Name the method and give the results.
Sure. The Taojian Formation, where a lot of those feathered dinosaurs are found, dated with, I think, uranium lead. I can't remember exactly, but dated around 160, 165 million years old.
All right, thanks for the answer. Dr. Dino, anything you wanted to add to that?
I go back to my original question. Regardless of what the radioactive dating shows, how can any layer be a different age? Where did it come from 165 million years ago? All the layers are the same age, whether they're all 10 billion or 6,000. They're all the same age. There is no geologic column.
Except for all those places where there is one.
What did you say? I couldn't hear that.
Except for all the places where there is one.
Except for all the places where there is one. Is that what you said, Jackson?
Yeah.
Oh, geologic column? No, Jackson. There are layers. Let's say they predicted the 12 layers are in a certain order. That's random shuffling. You may find those in that order. That doesn't prove it is the geologic column.
All right.
All right, let's go right to the next one. We've got a great mix of questions for the both of you. This has been a great debate, very engaging. So lots of good feedback. This one comes in from Darth. I appreciate the super chat there, $10 super chat. So this one is for you, Kent. And she asks, what about Rhodocetus, a whale transition fossil? The pelvis of Rhodocetus was still connected to the sacral vertebra, so Rhodocetus could walk. The ilium of the pelvis was short, typical of, and it cuts off there, I think, swimming whales, it probably says. I've got it up on screen for you. Oh, typical of swimmers, it says.
Okay. Again, you find fossils in the dirt. All you know is it died. You don't know that Rhodocetus had any children. You certainly don't know it's transitional. The fact that it had some unusual features might be an unusual creature that went extinct. They tell the kids that the whale is evidence for evolution. Even the National Center for Science Miseducation in Berkeley, California, they say they have the demonstration about the whale evolving. They say the whale has a pelvis. It's in all the textbooks. Just imagine whales walking around. It's true. They keep referring to these bones right here. We got one in our museum, the bones from the whale. That's part of a necessary bone structure to support necessary muscles for the whales to reproduce. Got nothing to do with being a hip bone or walking on land. And even if you could find there's animals today that live in the water mostly and come out on land once in a while. Take the alligator or crocodile. They do that. So that's not a problem. These bones are not hip bones. They're not vestigial leg bones. They're part of the whale's reproductive system. It's part of the whale's. There's one, me holding one right there. It's got a good nerve supply, good blood supply. Their penis might be 15 feet long. They got a mate in the dark underwater with no arms and they can't talk and say, scoot over, honey. This has nothing to do with walking on land, okay? It has to do with a whale making more baby whales. That's all it is. The male and female whales have very different bones and muscles in that region, so they can match up and make a baby whale. It's got nothing to do with evolution. So the Rhodocetus may indeed just be an extinct type of whale, but again, in a court of law, no bones are going to count, none.
Yeah, there are about 50 genera of legged whales in the fossil record. And that's really all I have. You had mentioned Hitler earlier, which Godwin's law, I guess. So that's all.
Kent, you get the last word, brother. Is your question, if there's anything you wanted to add.
No, I think the question, so Rhodocetus could walk. Well, you don't know that. The fact that it's got a pelvis doesn't mean it can walk. It means maybe it needs that to make babies. Okay, those bones. And I don't think a pelvis would be the right way to describe that. Let's see. That is right here. Oh, that's not a pelvis. Those bones are anchor points. You have bone in your throat, not connected to any other bones. That allows you to talk and swallow. It's totally separate. Part of your skeletal system, though, but it's not connected to any other bones. That's a different story. Go ahead.
All right, I appreciate it. So this next question, I got it up on screen here, comes in from Christian Talk Radio with Brett Keane. So he says, question is for Jackson Rowe. Can Rowe prove any of those corpses and bones had children?
Not really, but you can prove they're part of the population, and maybe they had descendants. Maybe they were an evolutionary dead end, but by definition, they're still transitional.
All right, thank you, Jackson, and thanks for the question there, Brett. Over to you, Dr. Dino.
Well, you don't know that it's part of a population. If evolution works the way you guys say it does, one animal has to have a mutation to change it different than all the rest of them. So it might just be one happened. Because that's the way the whole theory based on the idea that one had to have that amoeba had to slowly become something into a shark or a whale. So there has to be slow changes. And if one of them evolves, a mutation that's beneficial, you got to have two in the same place of the opposite sex, and they got to find each other and be interested. This is a whole host of problems you guys got, and it's all imagination. It's not science. We don't see it. You can't test it. Put it in the laboratory. Do it again. Make it happen again, and then it becomes science, if it can be done. But if a bunch of scientists could produce life in the lab, that would prove it took intelligence to make life. You'd prove creation. Thank you. Go ahead.
That last bit was called moving the goalpost. Even if they do it, it doesn't count. So
no, if they do it, it doesn't prove evolution. That's what I said. And if they do it, it would prove it took intelligence to do it.
Mm-hmm. Moving the goalpost.
It would not prove it happened by chance. I think a bunch of people can dig iron ore out of the ground and melt it down and make parts and make a car that'll run. I don't think the iron ore can make the car by itself, though.
Well, of course not. And you're not going to get something different in one generation.
We'll get you converted.
Maybe someday if the evidence shows it, but right now, I don't think it does.
Okay. Hope you live long enough to make it to that point. Go ahead.
Well, I think if a God existed, he wouldn't send me to hell just for genuinely not genuinely having doubts.
Now, he sent me to help you. You're not listening. Go ahead.
Maybe.
All right, here we go. Next question comes in here from Landon Freeman. I appreciate it. This one's for you, Jackson. So I've got it up on screen here, and he asks, how did transitional organisms evolve the built-in instinct or software needed to consciously and subconsciously utilize their newly evolved abilities?
Well, I think mental traits can evolve along with physical traits. I don't really know much about that, but that would be my basic answer.
All right. Anything you wanted to add there, Kent?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and another evidence that it didn't happen. You have to make up a story of how it might have happened. That's not science. Make up all the stories you want. But yeah, I think not only do you can take anything, we have an ability, if you get poked by something sharp, you feel the pain. Did the first animal, was it able to feel pain? And then you have to respond to that, jerk back away, the reflex. And then you got to be able to heal the damage. The healing process is phenomenal. Ask any doctor or nurse. All that had to happen at the same time. I think it's not possible. I'd much rather believe in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and I can give glory to God. I can look at the animals and say, wow, God, you're smart. That was awesome. That was cool. Like the porcupines. How on earth do they get babies? I don't know, but they get them. Pretty smart, the way God designed all that.
Well,
all right.
Oh, sorry.
No. Go ahead, Jackson.
Well, again, you're not hearing me. I think there could be a God guiding this process.
Or it could be God designed it right to begin with. You're not hearing either, Jackson.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so here's the next question now. This one is going to be for Dr. Hovind. You guys are making for an awesome debate here. Definitely one to remember. So this one comes in from Andrew Cumming. Got it up on screen here. He says, question for Kent. What is your definition of a transitional fossil?
Well, I showed that at the beginning. The dictionary definition of transitional fossils. Let's see. I got 18,000 slides here, so give me a second. But I started my presentation that way. What they're saying, the definition of transitional fossil. It would be evidence that, here you go. Are there any transitional fossils? Transitioning or changing from one to another. That's what they call it. They call it a transitional fossil. No, there are no transitional fossils. There are fossils. But you couldn't prove it's transitional to anything. You couldn't prove it had any kids. That's my point. So you find a fossil in the dirt, it died. That you can prove. And you could prove it probably lived. Okay, I'd go along with that. You couldn't prove it had any kids. You certainly couldn't prove it's transitional. So the definition of transitional, according to National Center for Science Miseducation in Berkeley, fossils are transitional with transitional morphology are not rare. They're lying through their teeth. Tell Jeannie Scott I said so, and I'll debate her anytime. Okay, again. Fossils illustrating gradual origin of humans. That's baloney. You can arrange something in order and draw lines in it. It doesn't prove they're transitional. You arranged them in order and drew lines on them. That's all. Same with the horses and rhinos and whales and sea cows and mammals and birds and tetrapods. It's all lines on paper. It's not science.
All right. I appreciate that response there, Kent. Let's hand it over to Jackson. Jackson, anything you wanted to add to that question and response?
Well, mammals and birds are tetrapods. They're not different than tetrapods. But yeah, I don't think you can really define what a transitional fossil is from his perspective, because he's not going to believe it regardless. I mean, so really this debate has been a huge waste of time, really, if you think about it. But anyway.
I agree.
Okay, here's the last question, and we're going to wind it down here. Hour and a half really has flown by. We still got a couple hundred people in the chat, so definitely a debate to remember. So this one comes in from Jungle Jargon, and $5 super chat question is for Jackson. I'm going to give a disclaimer to the audience. We did get some flat earth questions in. So, I know people are going to be like, oh, why didn't you get to my question? The debate is not about flat earth. So maybe it's my globe in the background. I don't know. So I can't get to those flat earth questions. But yeah, let's end it with this one. This one is related to the debate itself. Jackson, You think that the fossils are evidence of animals getting vast amounts of written instructions to be something different than what they are.
Sure.
There you go, Dr.
Yeah,
Now, Jackson, we need to see your globe too.
I don't have one. But yeah, mutations happen. They most of them are neutral, some are detrimental, some are beneficial. There are whole genome duplications that have happened in the past, especially with fish. I was reading about that last night, actually. But anyway, I don't have much else to add.
Anything you wanted to add, Dr. Hovind?
Yeah, yes. He said there are some mutations that are beneficial. I'd like to hear about that. There's lots of mutations that are neutral or fatal. I'm not aware of any that are beneficial. And you would need trillions of them. And yes, the Earth is round, except for Kansas, that's flat. The rest of it's round. Okay, go ahead.
Well, a beneficial mutation would be Delta variant changing into Omicron to get around vaccines, which it obviously does. I think
I'm not understanding a word you're saying. What now?
Go ahead, Jackson.
Like Delta changing to Omicron, COVID, to get around vaccines.
Oh, Jackson, you're trying to get us in trouble here.
Oh, sorry, I said the V word.
Yeah.
The other V word.
Well, Dr. Hovind, before we shut it down, this is the here on screen is the flat Earth question. They did pay money. I don't know if you want to answer it. It's not really related. He says, Dr. Hovind, do you reject a fixed flat Earth with moving sun and firmament?
Completely reject it. The Earth is a round ball spinning around 1,038 miles an hour at the equator. It goes around the Earth around the sun once a year. Goes around the solar system. Who knows? I mean, goes around the galaxy. Who knows how long that takes? I think that's a dumb. If you want to pick a fight, you picked a dumb one. Okay, the evolution is really where the battle is. Okay, and that whole flat Earth stuff makes the Christians look stupid, and they think they're defending God's word, and they are wrong. Okay, I love the Bible. I've read it many times, but I don't want to get involved in the flat Earth debate. It's dumb. Okay.
Well, I agree on that. Flat Earth is dumb, so that's good.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
There you go. You guys, perfect way to end it on something you guys agree on. There's nothing to fear but the sphere itself, according to the flat Earth.
The sphere itself. I love it.
We're triggering flat earthers tonight. So, gentlemen, Dr. Dino Jackson, I really appreciate this debate, an important topic, and it was a very engaging, entertaining, memorable debate. So as we always do before we shut it down, final words, final thoughts. Let's start with you, Jackson. Jackson, thank you for doing this.
Yep.
Go ahead, over to you. Final words.
All right. Well, I got kind of heated, but never crossed the line like the last debate. Kent had, but yeah, I like these debates, win, lose, or tie, like I always say. So, yeah, I'll hand it over to Kent.
All right, put my slides back up if you would. Who's doing that? There. Oh, I got it. Sit over here. Okay. God is not a man that he should lie. God said clearly he created the world in 6 days. He said clearly, Jesus said the creation of Adam was the beginning. He wrote on the 10 Commandments. He made it all in 6 days. God's not a man, and you need to beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy. Evolution is a philosophy. You've been deceived, okay? God's not going to lie. Hope of eternal life, God cannot lie. He promised, whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. February 9th will be my 53rd birthday in God's family. I asked the Lord to save me. I think God made the world, and he owns it, and he makes the rules like the 10 Commandments, and we're all guilty of breaking his rules. All of us are. He said, don't bear false witness. Yep, don't steal. We've broken his rules. We're going to be punished, or you got to find a substitute. And Jesus Christ, God himself came down and said, look, I want you to come to my heaven. I'll pay for your sin, but you got to accept my substitute. You got to accept my penalty. I pay your penalty. So if you died today, where would you go? Smoking or non-smoking? Might want to think about it. You're going to be dead for a long time. Jackson, all anybody gets in this life is a little bitty dash between two dates. I already know my first date on mine. I don't know the last one yet. I'm going to try to make it as big a number as I can, but it's going to happen. So what on earth are you doing, for heaven's sake? You Christians out there, what are you doing? There's a war going on. Come on, get involved. Do something. If you're not going to shoot, carry bullets or pay for the bullets or do something. Find something to do. Come visit our Dinosaur Adventure Land. Jackson, come. I'll give you the tour of the whole place. You'll love it down here.
I'd like to come, actually, yeah.
Yeah, come on down.
Actually, that's a perfect way to move into this super chat that just came in from Born 100 Years Late. He says, Jackson, if I pay for a full expense trip for you to go to Dal for a week, will you agree to go with an open heart and agree to learn about God for a week?
Sure would. I would,
Hey,
I would do it. And but it would have to be after summer, I think. So it would have to be a little bit in the future. But yeah, I would do it.
DAL is free. Now, getting
Okay.
here might not be free, but once you get here, we'll feed you and house you. And after a couple of days, we'll give you a hammer and put you to work.
All right.
There we go. I'll join you guys. So I appreciate all the support and the questions from the audience. As always, we always have a great audience Q&A. It's always a blast. So Jackson and Dr. Hovind, I appreciate your time for tonight. I'll let you guys get out of here. Thanks again for a great debate, and thank you to the audience for tuning in. Standing for Truth is out.